Welcome to the Ag Inspo Podcast, where we delve into the dynamic world of agriculture, uncovering the stories that inspire, empower, and drive change. Join hosts Rena Striegel and Rabou as they explore the journeys of farmers, entrepreneurs, and leaders who are making a difference as they navigate the critical work of transitioning their operation to the next generation. From navigating family dynamics to developing the next generation of ag leaders, we'll bring you the insights and inspiration you need to thrive in today's ever-evolving agricultural landscape. So whether you're a seasoned industry veteran or just starting out, get ready to be inspired, informed, and empowered as we learn from best practices and a few colossal failures on the Ag Inspo Podcast.
Welcome, everyone, to the Ag Inspo Podcast, and we are excited to bring you another awesome episode of inspiring stories in American agriculture. And today we have with us a super fun special guest who we're going to talk about a lot of different things, a wide array of things. We've got Kevin Ochsner with us today from Colorado, and I've got my awesome and amazing co-host with me today, of course, the amazing Rena Striegel. Rena, how's it going?
It's going extremely well. Good morning. Good morning, Kevin. And just excited. Kevin actually has a couple of things going on that I knew very little about. So I am extremely excited to dig into this conversation today, because it's not like I assume that because I don't know, a lot of people don't know, but I was incredibly fascinated by some of the things that he and his wife are invested in, and am excited for the conversation today.
Yes, and so I say we just get going here. And Kevin, welcome to our show. Thanks for taking the time. I know that your schedule is very busy. You've gotten a tremendous amount going on. And honestly, I'm just going to let you introduce yourself because I can't do it justice. And I'd like to talk a little bit about our background and kind of maybe how we got to this point. But if you could just begin by just introducing yourself and telling our audience who you are, what your background is, and we'll go from there.
Absolutely. Well, Ron and Rena, thank you so much for having me. Ron, as you and I know, we go back a long way because of the blue and gold jacket, and anxious to reconnect with you after many years and have this discussion. I grew up on a irrigated farm and registered cattle operation at Fort Collins, Colorado, about 60 miles straight north of Denver. And went to Colorado State University. I guess I should go back and say that, like many of us in agriculture, I was very, very actively involved in 4-H and FFA. First in 4-H, showing cattle, but also participating in livestock judging, and had the opportunity to participate on both the state and national champion livestock judging team that really not only encouraged me in the livestock space, but helped develop some speaking and communication skills that then I think launched some really fun times in the FFA organization. I was both a state and national FFA officer through FFA. And Ron, you'll remember this because we share much of the same story in terms of the 1980s. It was a tough time in agriculture. And I tell people that I was running for national office really as the family farm was going broke. I mean, it was 1987, and I became a national FFA officer and served that year as national FFA officer. When I graduated from college in 1991, I tell folks that there wasn't a home farm to come home to. My folks had purchased some land in the late 1970s. My grandpa died in 1979. They rolled into the 1980s with all the debt and half the workforce, and it didn't end well. And so one part of the story, and why I love the Ag Inspo comment, is that it does take some inspiration and motivation to claw and scratch your way back into the agricultural industry. And my wife and I both have a passion for it. And so we spent the last 30 years trying to get our way back into to production agriculture. But moving on, because there wasn't a home farm to come home to, that led me to do an internship, first of all, with a company called Agribusiness Group out of Indianapolis. It was led and founded by a gentleman who served as National FFA Secretary as I did, but about 10 or 12 years before me. And he offered me an internship between my junior and senior year. I actually went to work for them following college graduation, and ultimately worked for Mike and David for 23 years, and became a partner of that business. During that time, my wife and I moved back to Colorado because we wanted to raise our kids closer to grandparents and, as importantly, in a more agricultural community rather than Fishers, Indiana, which was where we were living, during my formative career in my early years. Bought a place along the South Platte River and started rebuilding a cow herd, continuing to do my consulting practice, and frankly started then my own consulting business about 11 years ago called Accelerate. So fast forward to today, that gets us to a point where my beautiful wife and I have 3 grown children. We live in Kersey, Colorado, about 65 miles northeast of Denver. I continue my consulting practice and do a lot of strategic planning and public speaking, keynote speaking, and so forth. We have about 200 head of registered limousine Limflex cows and an annual production sale, and my wife operates a direct-to-consumer beef business. And then I too also have some active interest serving as host of NCBA's Cattleman to Cattleman. So we do juggle a lot of balls, but I enjoy it, and frankly, I'm wired in a way that I think I would be bored otherwise.
I think a lot of us who are ex-FFAers are kind of wired that way, right? So where we first met, so our audience understands, and I think Rena knows this story. That so when I was a senior in high school at my little tiny school, I always tell everyone, that we were one of the biggest classes that our school had ever had. There was 12 students in our class.
And if I don't remember, I think you graduated in the top 10 of your class, didn't you?
I did actually, and our class was actually all girls, except for 9 guys. And so we were, I always tell everyone, if we wanted to go on a date, it was a 100-mile round trip. And it's just the way it works, right? Like if you wanted to find a girl, you had to drive 100 miles round trip. And then if you wanted to, even if you found a local girl, what are you going to do here? If you're going to go to the movie, it's a 100-mile round trip. So the joke in Wyoming is everything is a 100-mile round trip because all of our towns seem like they're 50 miles apart from each other. But when I was a senior in high school, about ready to graduate, in the top 10 of my class. Yeah. And I would really clarify that a little bit. I'd say more like the top 12. And so I was the chapter FFA president, and we were we were having our banquet, and we were looking for keynote speakers. And I don't actually recall how I ran across your name, but I do remember reaching out to you, and you were willing to come and give our keynote speech at our chapter banquet. And I remember you came with your mom, which I thought was very, very cool. And so you gave a keynote speech, and I thought, man, I want to be like that guy. He really had a great message. He delivered it beautifully, and it was really an inspirational message during that time. And really, at that time, I had just been selected as a Wyoming State FFA officer, and eventually ran on to run for national office and was on National FFA's Made for Excellence staff. So we have a history in that, but. I think the bigger message is there that we don't ever know the things that we say and the things that we do and the example that we set. We don't ever know what kind of an impact that's going to have for other people. But the message you shared with us in this little tiny town with literal orange lunch seats, orange plastic lunch seats, right, from probably the 1970s, as we had our FFA banquet, there you were, and gollies, 40 years later, just about, here we are today, maintaining that relationship and continuing to stay in touch and continuing, hopefully, to do great things in American agriculture. So you mentioned your family. When you did your introduction there. So you've got 2 beautiful young ladies, and your son is he a senior this year?
He's a senior at Texas Tech University. Yes, sir.
Yes. And so I'm going to try, I know you mentioned CSU. We try not to mention CSU any more than we have to on this podcast. Rena, there's a huge rival between the University of Wyoming and Colorado State University. I won't tell everyone what Wyoming's tagline is for that, but Kevin knows exactly what it is. And so it's kind of a fun thing we play for the boot every year.
Yeah.
In the football game, on the border war is what we call it. But all of your kids have had an extensive background in FFA as well. And so I know that from those early days when you and I first met, FFA has certainly grown. Maybe talk a little bit about the impact that it had for you personally and the kind of the evolution of the program and what your kids experienced in it today and the skills that they were able to glean from the organization and how that's helped them with what they're doing today and what their career choices are and whatnot.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and I remember that well. Heading up to your banquet, I had forgotten, but I recall now that my mom was my chauffeur. I was in college, and I actually had her do that a number of times. I remember doing the same thing at a banquet in Kansas. I was knee deep in college studies, and so typically she would drive, and I could study and do some assignments on the way. And then, of course, as we came back, a lot of times it was too late, and I would sleep and then go to class the next day. And so she's been my biggest supporter and fan for my entire life, and was very, very kind to sacrifice her time to do that a number of times. But FFA meant a lot to me. My dad really kind of fired up my interest in it. He was an American farmer degree recipient, and so when I came of age, it was not a real option. He wanted me to at least try FFA and see if I liked it, right? And got involved in agriculture education and FFA there in Fort Collins. And I guess first part of your question in terms of me, I would say it like this, Ron. I mean, I've always said that FFA gave an ordinary farm boy some extraordinary opportunities. And I know enough to understand that so many of the opportunities I received in FFA were less about who was in the jacket and more about the fact that I was wearing a blue and gold jacket. It opened so many doors for me. It's unbelievable. And so as I just kind of recount some of the things it did for me, number one, I found my place in FFA. I went to in Fort Collins, a much larger high school than you did. So we had 358 kids in our graduating class. And while at one time Fort Collins was a very agricultural community, by the time I was growing up, it was becoming much less agricultural. And so when I went to school wearing Wranglers or Ropers, I was the outcast and the odd duck, and I was not a big athlete. And so it was just like, who is this hayseed hick, country bumpkin here? And when I went to the ag class, I found an area that I was so passionate about, and whether it be given that creed as a green hand, or whether it be going to the livestock judging contest, I found something I loved, I was passionate about, I could be good at, and I could find my people. And so I think, number one, it gave me a sense of belonging to begin with. Number two, it gave me incredible confidence, right? I mean, and a lot of that, frankly, Ron, came through the speaking venue. I don't think there's an organization out there that actually teaches young people to be better communicators than FFA. And when you become, as you know, when you develop your communication skills and your skills in interacting with people, you also develop some self-confidence on the way. I think third, it opened up so many doors and avenues. I mean, I remember everything from the first time I went to Kansas City and heard Zig Ziglar speak. I never knew, it sounded like a sewing machine company or something, right? But I heard this motivational speaker that fired me up. I went to a museum of Jerry Litton, who was a national secretary 40, 50 years before me, and not even that long, I guess, but from Missouri, became a U.S. congressman and raised Charolais cattle and became just a lifelong inspiration to me, even though I never knew the man. I met so many of my dear friends. FFA ultimately introduced me to my wife. Julie was state FFA president in Nebraska when I was a national officer. And it introduced me to Mike Jackson, who was the president and founder of Agribusiness Group, who again had an FFA background and started an internship program through FFA that I applied for and received, that ultimately landed me in that job and has frankly given me a 30-some year career. So it's the bigger question is, how hasn't FFA impacted my life? Because it is just impacting all facets of my life, from my professional life to my personal life.
You know, I remember you mentioned getting up and giving the creed, and I remember doing that because I didn't really know. Here's what I remember. I remember that I was not, at the time, I was not a huge fan. I mean, I was 15 years old, right? 14,
Right.
15 years old. I was not a huge fan of my ag teacher because he was just very matter of fact. And my mom said, well, you can quit. And my dad said, the heck you will. And so, because he was a Wyoming State FFA officer, so he knew, he was in the program, obviously, in the 50s. And so I remember going to give the creed. And so, keeping in mind, in the same lunchroom where you gave this speech, this is where we did our creed contest, because there was a stage in there, if you remember. And then you got the lunchroom tables, and then around the room, you have all the pictures of all the graduating classes from the inception of the high school. And my grandfather, incidentally, was a class of, I think there were 6 or 8 of them, and he was the first graduating class from the high school.
Wow.
So every day when I went through the lunch line, there my grandpa was when he was 18 years old, in that very first picture. But they went in order, right, around the lunchroom. And so I remember we would go downstairs to the teacher's lounge, because there was a set of stairs that led down to the teacher's lounge in the basement. And we were all down there. And I just remember being in total panic about I was going to have to go in front of all these people, which in retrospect was like, I don't know, 20 maybe, right? It was my classmates essentially and their parents. And I remember being down there, and I was super awkward. So I had these super long pants on, these black Wranglers with my FFA jacket. And the only pair of boots that my parents could find for me in 13 AAA.
Oh my.
Were a cream color pair of cowboy boots, Rena. No less pointy cowboy boots.
Yep.
Oh, please tell me there's a picture somewhere. We must have the picture.
And so I just remember being down there thinking, I don't think I can go through with this, because I've never spoken in front of an audience before. And I just remember being in sheer panic. And I do remember one of my friends who was kind of the class clown, I guess. He decided it would be funny if he took his pants down and sat on the copy machine and copied in the teacher's lounge and left the copy in there. And I thought, okay, maybe I can do this, because that was really funny. It took my nerves away. I just remember that, going upstairs, going out on that stage, and speaking for the very, very first time, and winning the creed contest, and then winning every subsequent prepared speaking contest from that point on.
Wow.
It was something that I never believed that I could do. But your sentiments about the fact that it builds confidence, because you don't have to be a good speaker, but we all communicate all the time.
That's right.
And so we all need to understand what the value of that communication is, and how we can best communicate in our own way for our own message, and the value of listening to others, all of those things. I learned all of that in FFA, and now I get a little bit crabby if I haven't given a speech for a while, because I just love to do it. But it all stemmed from that time with the copy machine and the teacher's lounge. That, by the way, it smelled like cigarette smoke, because that's what the teachers did in the teacher's lounge back in those days.
Rena,
so it's the start of all of it, right? Like, it just instills the program instills confidence.
Oh, without question.
I can't imagine. I think that you worded it best when you said, what has FFA not done?
Yeah.
in your life. And I think that that's really the foundation that helps build so many of us who are in, it doesn't even matter if we're in agriculture, but we're just in business and we're in life, and it teaches those skills that no other program can.
Yeah, and you mentioned our kids. Number one, Rena, I have to say, if you find the picture of either the pointy-toed cowboy boots or the copy machine picture, it would be worthwhile to share on this podcast. But you mentioned my kids, and just thinking generationally for a minute, Ron, I do think that now, even more so than when you and I were kids, there's a whole generation of people that just getting a young person to look me squarely in the eye and carrying on a couple of sentence conversation is a big deal today. You know, there's so many folks are so used to the phone and texting and communicating that way that engaging in a conversation one-on-one, and as I think Zig Ziglar once said, he said, a public speech is nothing more than a series of conversations between individual people. I talked to this person for a little while, then I talked to that person, and then I talked to that person, and that ultimately you've talked to, in his case, 20 or 30,000 people in an arena.
Right.
But I think about my kids, and my one thing that I am very proud of, and again, we wanted them established in FFA. Both Julie and I shared a love of that. And when we settled in Kersey, Colorado, one of the reason when we came back to Colorado was in Kersey because they had an incredibly strong FFA chapter and had been known for a strong FFA chapter. So they all got involved. Each one of my three children won the state creed speaking contest. My daughter, I guess two of my daughter, the two girls won the prepared public speaking contest, and my middle daughter was state FFA president, and my son was the only one of the three that was actually chapter FFA president. And so I will tell you that you could ask any of those kids, our kids, just how important that FFA experience meant to them. And I take my oldest daughter as an example in the sense that she today is a worship leader at a church in town, Cornerstone Church, and she loved speaking. She loved agriculture. She was a skilled livestock judge. She was skilled at leading others. But I will tell you this, she loved singing and developed that passion early on. And lo and behold, she had an opportunity to go back to FFA. You don't think of FFA being a singing organization, but she went back there and she participated in the talent contest at the National FFA Convention, made it into the finals, I think was ultimately second in the National Talent Contest. Ultimately sang the national anthem at the National Finals Rodeo in Vegas, and then went on to Belmont University. And today, she doesn't stand up to give speeches. She stands up in front of a congregation on Sunday and puts her words together and shares a message, and then goes ahead and shares her gift of song. And I would tell you, it's just amazing to me that an agriculture youth organization can even give a girl like Caitlin such an incredible opportunity to identify and explore her gift, use her gift for the benefit of other FFA members, and ultimately find her career choice, even though it's not directly in agriculture. So that's another very separate success story, but one that I think many people would share in FFA, that an experience they had through career development or contests lit their fire and identified a talent that they had that they wanted to pursue. And I just think it's amazing organization for that.
That I think otherwise maybe would have been hard to pull out. I think unless you're forced in these situations where you're sweating in the teacher's lounge and you're forced to go upstairs, or you're going to fail the class, unless you're put in that position, you don't really know what you're capable of. And I think that is something too that so many of us, because of the world in which we live in a very, very comfortable world. Yeah. And we don't like to get out of our comfort zone. We don't like to do things that make us uncomfortable in any way whatsoever. But I think that's what makes us better people. That's what helps us understand what our talents and our abilities are, and really helps pull that out of us so that we can make the contribution that we were meant to make in this world.
Yeah, I would add, you mentioned the word comfort, and I didn't coin this phrase, but I used it with all three of my kids. There's no growth in the comfort zone, and there's no comfort in the growth zone. And
Mhm.
that is something that I think FFA teaches you. My daughter, my middle daughter, I laugh a little bit about her because she grew up in 4-H livestock judging, loved livestock judging, particularly beef cattle. But her FFA advisor encouraged her to go out for the dairy team the first year. And so they went ahead and put a team together, went out for the dairy contest, judged dairy cattle. I remember talking to her at the end of the state convention, the state contest before the awards. And her exact comment was, Dad, if I never see a dairy cow in my life again, it'll be too soon. She was just tired of it and didn't think she went. Well, lo and behold, they won the state dairy judging contest that day. And she had to see dairy cows again when she went to the National FFA Convention to judge them. And interestingly enough, fast forward a number of years later, a year ago, after graduating from college, she took a job with Elanco Animal Health. And guess what species she has? She is the dairy
Dairy.
representative for Eastern Colorado and Western Kansas. And I said, you know what? Sometimes God has a pretty good sense of humor.
Absolutely.
No question
Absolutely.
about that. Wow. Well, now you have, well, when I was a sophomore in high school, um, our teacher, of course, because we had a small school, you had to judge basically everything.
Yeah.
So I got put on the dairy team. And I thought, I don't know anything about a dairy cow. And then when they announced awards, I was a third high individual in the state. I thought, I don't even know what I was doing. I guess, when you answer C to all the multiple choice, maybe it does actually work. Uh, so,
That's classic.
tell us a little bit. Let's get into the ag side
Yeah.
a little bit about what you do. We'd like to learn more about your ag operation and what you're doing with. Rena mentioned before we got started here about the limb flex
Yeah.
that you have going on. So essentially, you are first generation production agriculturalist that has built your own place. And so walk us through that journey a little bit and how you went from where you started to where you are today.
Sure. No, and that's what I come from I tell people I come from a multi-generational farm family on a first generation farm and ranch. And I think that's a fair way to describe it. But my dad gave each of us boys, my brother and I, a 2-year-old heifer when we were 2 years old. And we started, that began, our 4-H project. And so he gave me a 2-year-old Angus heifer. And by the time I was 8 or 9 years old, I'd saved up some money from some 4-H steers and other calves that I'd sold from her before I got into 4-H that I had bought, and this is amazing, 1976, I bought 4 half-blood limousine cows, 50% limousine, 50% Angus, for $275 a piece, believe it or not. And
Wow.
then that January, that would have been the fall, and that January I went to the National Western Stock Show and bought a 75% limousine female, that bred heifer, for $1,700. My dad actually took me to the bank because I didn't have quite enough money, and I had to borrow just a little money in order to purchase that female at National Western Stock Show. And just as an aside, in 2016, we showed the Supreme Champion Bull at the Nebraska Cattlemen's Classic, and he traced his lineage all the way back 7 generations to that $1,700 cow I bought when I was 10 years old.
Wow.
So there's a lot of passion and history in any kind of registered cattle business. That started my own herd, and by the time we graduated from college, my brother and I put together about 25 cows. I call it an overgrown 4-H project. And that's kind of what it was. And of course, they weren't collateral at the bank, and so we were able to keep our cattle, even though there wasn't mom and dad's herd to go along with it. And while I was in college, and even my first several years of professional life, my mom and dad and some dear friends, we had cattle. My brother took care of them for a while. My judging team partner, Matt Lewis in Sterling, took care of them for a while. My mom and dad took care of them for a while. And I was just trying to keep that base cow herd together while I was starting a career back in Indianapolis. And we were able to do that. And then when we moved back here to Colorado in 1998, and bought this place where we could actually both house the cattle and also take care of the cattle on our own. It was not long after that I've always had a passion for registered seed stock business, didn't know how I was going to get my way back in it. And I went to Minnesota to visit a gentleman that I'd known through the limousine business, Jerry Wolf of Wolf Limousine, one of the great families in the beef cattle business. And we talked that day, and I was telling him some of my dreams and my passions, and that I couldn't figure out how I was going to do this and still keep, because I couldn't leave my consulting job. That was the economic engine that was going to fund this. And he said, he says, we've worked out a satellite arrangement for some people. And he said, most of them are closer than Colorado, but he said, I'd be interested in working with you if that's what you'd like to do. So I bought a potload of cows from the Wolf family, and we became a satellite cooperator herd where we would raise the calves, wean the calves, the bulls that were high enough quality. We would ship to Morris, Minnesota. They would put those on test and sell them in their annual opportunity sale. And we did that for 16 years while we were growing our cow herd. Luckily, the way this all enabled it to happen is number one, I married a farm girl who is not afraid of work, and she'll outwork 2 or 3 men, I promise you that. And so we decided that while I was going to chase around the country and leave a lot of times on Monday and come back on Thursday doing my consulting thing, she would stay home and take care of kids and cows. My dad was semi-retired at that point in time, and we bought another farm, and mom and dad put a house on that farm so they could be close to us. And dad would run the feed truck and help calve the cows and breed the cows, and so I was able to give him a job, and he was able to do what he loves, while I had access to a man who had so much expertise that I promise you I wasn't able to pay him what he was worth, but he was able to do what he loves. They were able to live where they want to live, close to the grandkids, while I continued my consulting practice. And so it was a combination of things that allowed us. I found a great mentor in Jerry Wolf. I had a loving mom and dad that were 5 miles away and would fill in the gaps when I was, somewhere on Wednesday night and Julie was having trouble with the cow calving, or the cows got out or something. And I had a wife and 3 kids that had as much passion for this as I did, and really shared this dream. And that's really the only way this has worked over the last 30 years.
Mhm.
I think we got to pause for just a second and give a shout out to those men and women who are helping young farmers, ranchers, agriculturalists get into the business
Yes.
in much the way that you're talking there, where they're, sharing their expertise, sharing resources, giving seed stock, just really helping to perpetuate that next generation of farmers. I hear about that every once in a while,
Yeah.
where a man or a woman has really poured into the next generation in some very extraordinary and very giving ways, and created a win-win situation, but financially probably was very much to the detriment of their own farming operation to help that
Sure.
next generation in. I think we just gotta, I'd like just pause to say thank you to all of those people that are investing in that way.
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more, Rena. And it's one of those things that, to find a good mentor, I think is one of the most critical things that you can do in any occupation, but certainly in agriculture. And I found that in Jerry Wolf. I mean, Jerry's a great Christian man. He's a great cattleman. And his family, going back to his dad, actually grew up in Iowa, Rena,
Yeah.
and then moved to Morris, Minnesota, and have built an incredible operation up there. And yeah, this is a guy who, walking through pasture in the middle of Minnesota, hearing this young guy who kind of had a dream, and going, this is a little bit, yeah, we have some satellite cooperator herds in Iowa and Minnesota and places around us, but maybe I ought to just see if he's interested in this. And he pitches that to me to say, yeah, if you're a little further away than most people we work with, but Kevin, if you want to take a go of this, buy you some cows here, take them home, see if you can make some cattle that are good enough for our sale, and we'll give you a way to market those cattle. And I'll tell you, Rena, that, I mean, I wouldn't be where I was without that today. And again, for them, it was less about some sort of risky loan and those kinds of things, but he was taking a gamble on a kid, and committing to kind of sell some of those cattle through his production sale, put his name on them. But it's something that has changed the trajectory of my life, and certainly, like so many other situations like this, the business part of it has been great. The personal part of it has been better. I mean, I consider him such a dear friend and a mentor, and that would have never happened were it not for those doggone cattle.
Yeah. That's really awesome. I see that like a lot in cattle, particularly like when you get around some of those men and women that have been in the industry for a very long time, their instinct for the business is really quite unique in the world of agriculture, I think. They've just got such a connection not only to the cattle and the cattlemen, but also just an instinct for the breed and instinct for just where economics are taking, the industry. It's really quite remarkable to get to spend time with people like that.
Oh, without question. And I think there's a lot of people out there, and I would also say this, that a lot of those people are so busy, they're not going to come searching you. And so you have to reach out to them and say, hey, I'd like to learn something, and
Yeah.
I have shared that with my son, who has a deep passion for the horse business, and he's trying to think about what's the next step in his life. And I said, if it were me, if I want to do what you want to do in terms of riding and training these high-end reined cow horses, I said, you go find a master and sit at the foot of the master for a while and see what you can learn, because I truly believe that again. It's about learning, and you can spend 20 years stubbing your toe, or you can engage with people who have stubbed their toe 14 times already and help you kind of navigate around the furniture so you don't have to stub it yourself.
Yeah. Yep. And that's a hard thing to learn, I think, sometimes for young people that are really all full of that energy and that
Yeah.
excitement and that can do and that drive to win, is to slow down to learn from others,
Yeah.
because so many of us are really wired to learn things the hard way, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And if you can get people to really understand the benefit of that slow progression, really stopping to listen, being able to sit there long enough to pick up the nugget,
Yeah.
it really does give you a huge leap forward sometimes in terms of your learning curve.
Totally agree.
But I think that that's also just a pretty powerful lesson in the fact that none of us are entitled to anything,
Right.
and that if we want something, we should go get it. But we live in a society where no one, at least in a developed country, doesn't have an answer to a question, because we can get those. But the value that, even though we can go get, quote unquote, our own answers, because all we have to do is go to, Mother Google and do that we can't glean all the information and the insight that we need by Googling it. We can't glean all the information we need by going to school or by reading a book on it. That nothing replaces the value of true mentorship and someone that has already been there, and someone that can guide you through that I know that the mentors have played a enormously powerful role in my life, in the sense that maybe they didn't necessarily, my mentors don't know a lot about agriculture, but helped propel me to the point that I had enough confidence to go out on my own and build my own operation. And then I found mentors within the industry that could help grow that part of it as well. But I think it's just really important in a world that's so fast paced that we want answers right now. We want to accomplish things right now. I need to have a new car right now. I need to have a new house right now. I need to start a family right now, whatever. Like, just take a step back, relax, get at the foot of that master, and really learn what you need to learn by taking all of that information in and being thoughtful about how you move forward.
Yeah, and I think you'd said a couple of words in terms of knowledge. I think knowledge is readily available. I think wisdom is more challenging to come by, and I think sometimes we confuse knowledge for wisdom. Google gives you lots of knowledge and facts. I think wisdom comes from combining life experiences with knowledge and facts. And I know, Ron, you and I share a deep faith, and there's a Proverbs that says, "Get wisdom, get understanding." And so, I think you can find knowledge in a lot of places. I think you have to be thoughtful and look for wisdom like you hunt for silver and gold.
Yeah.
No doubt. Well, tell us a little bit about this this limb flex.
Sure. Happy to visit about that. So, obviously in the cattle business, lots of different genetic alternatives, and just by way of history, clearly the Angus and Hereford cattle have been here the longest. Angus, Hereford, and Shorthorn have been in the United States the longest, clearly in terms of beef breeds. And then the 1970s came along. Well, I guess Charolais would have come in before the 70s, but the 1970s really ushered in lots of what we would call the continental or exotic breeds. And so all of a sudden, the Angus and Herefords, began looking over the fence and seeing everything from Charolais to Simmental to Limousin to Gelbvies, and exploring what that might mean and what value they brought to operations. And so my dad went to AI school in the late 60s, and he first started crossbreeding with Charolais cattle on his Angus cows. He actually raised the very first crossbred steer ever to win Colorado State Fair, something besides a straight Hereford Shorthorn or Angus, and that was a half Charolais, half Angus cross steer that he raised and sold to his younger brother, actually. And I think it was in 1972 that my Uncle Perry had the champion steer at Colorado State Fair. And then the 70s, that just really, not just that, he was one of many in the early 70s that said, oh my goodness, did you hear this? A crossbred Charolais steer won. And then you got to the middle 80s and limousine steers, crossbred limousine steers were winning San Antonio and Houston. And what was driving that is we had made these cattle so small, little growth, lots of fat. And people were saying, we've got to put more muscle in the carcasses and less fat and get animals that grow. Because of course, there was a time when we prided ourselves in how small and short and squatty we could make these cattle that we created actual dwarf cattle for a time. So that ushered in the continental, and you heard then for a while in the 80s that fat was bad and that we needed to have lean beef, and cholesterol was terrible for you. And so then we even pushed the foot feed even more, breeding to the Simmentals, the Limousin, the Charolais, and putting more of that blood in our cattle to get them bigger and leaner and more muscular. And what we discovered is we went too far in that process. And we certainly made them leaner, but we made a product that the consumers didn't want. And in fact, the first beef quality audit would indicate that 1 in 4 steaks was a bad eating experience. Okay. And so we went way too far the other way in making them big, lean, and tall. So I think over time, what we discovered is that really, I tell people that crossbreeding works in corn, and it works in hogs, and it works in cattle. And I'm a firm believer. One of the fundamental premises is if you want to have an efficient cattle operation, it's incumbent upon you to harness heterosis. I mean, there is no free lunch like heterosis in corn, in hogs, or in cattle. You get when you take two breeds of two very different breeds and cross them together, the opportunity and the benefit you get in terms of weight performance, in terms of longevity of cows, in terms of livability for calves and everything else just increases enormously. We've chosen to make that Limousin and Angus. And the reason we like those two breeds is that, as you know, Angus does a couple things quite well. Number one, they marble very, very well. And historically, they have been good mother cows. They've had some good maternal background. Limousin, on the other hand, the advantages they bring is they bring muscularity, they bring yield, they bring growth, and they bring feed efficiency. If you look at some of the meat animal research data, you'll notice that Limousin cattle are the most feed efficient cattle out there. And in fact, I'm proud to say that a bull that I raised and sold through Wolves, a bull by the name of Wolf's Game Boy, is rated #1 across all breeds. They published by Tally organization that does a lot of feed efficiency research and has these grow safe feed efficiency units. They publish every year the top 150 bulls of all breeds for feed efficiency. Wolf's Game Boy, a bull that was born on this ranch and sold through the Wolf sale, is the #1 breed across all breeds in feed efficiency. So he's an 83% Limousin. He's not quite a pure, so 83% Limousin, 17% Angus. The combination that we see is that I tell people that in the beef cattle industry, we have to recognize that we have to deliver to consumers a great eating process, a great eating proposition, because if a consumer doesn't buy a pound of beef, all we have is some very, very expensive pasture ornaments. Okay. And we have seen a robust increase in demand in beef over the last 20 years. We've seen all-time record highs in beef prices of over $8 a retail pound this last year. And I think that's largely because consumers recognize the value of protein and they love the taste of beef. And so we got to give consumers a great eating, experience. Number one. Number two, we can't do that and with no intention or no focus on cost efficiency and yield. Right now, we're taking cattle to higher out weights than we've ever taken cattle before. Our carcass weights this last year were 32 pounds, or I'm sorry, 23 pounds heavier on steers in 1 year than they were a year before.
Wow.
And so we are taking cattle to heavier outweights. And as we get cattle, instead of marketing them at 12 or 1,300 pounds, we're marketing them 15 and 1,600 pounds, having 1,000-pound carcasses. If you don't have some continental blood in those cattle, you're going to have lots of yield grade 4s and 5s. I was on a call the other night, and folks from South Dakota State University were talking about a pen of cattle they had that 30% of the cattle went prime, but 60% of the cattle were yield grade 4s and 5s. So that's just taking a lot of corn, feeding it to cattle, and trimming it back off in fat. And I fundamentally think even if RFK gets us all to frying in tallow, there is nothing more inefficient than spending resources to grow a bushel of corn, putting that corn through cattle, and then trimming off the fat. So we've got to strike the balance, in my opinion, between having high quality eating experiences and being able to do it efficiently without lots of waste. And that's why we choose to use Angus and Limousin together, bringing two complementary breeds together to deliver a product that I think is well suited for the day we live.
That's really amazing. It's just like when I was reading just about you just before we jumped on to start this, I was really fascinated because you don't hear, at least I don't, I shouldn't say that no one does, but you don't really hear that much about the Limousin as a breed.
Exactly.
You just don't hear that very often. So it was really fascinating that was a breed that you had chosen and why you had chosen it. And then to find out that it creates such a strong cross with a breed that we're really familiar with, which was the Angus. And so I found that to be a really fascinating choice, and just wondered if you could talk a little bit about the penetration of the Limousin breed into the meat market. Is that a breed that is on the growth curve, or is it still kind of a subset? Just talk a little bit about that.
I would say this: I don't think you will ever find, other than coming to individual producers like myself, and our business is called Ochsner Tender Raised Beef, and so we don't name it as after a breed anyway. I think people who are buying directly from the folks like us are more interested in the people and how it's raised and what it's raised, as opposed to they don't know the difference between Angus and Simmental or Gelbvieh or Hereford. It's just all, they may know Angus, but that's about all. So I don't know. I don't think you're going to find certified Limousin beef anytime soon in a grocery store near you. But what I will tell you is that much of the beef that you're purchasing may in fact have some Limousin beef, some Limousin genetics in it. So there's no doubt about it that, for instance, in certified Angus beef, there's a lot of certified Angus beef product that has other breeds involved in it, as long as it is black hided and meets their quality specifications. And I don't think you can take a purebred 94% or 98% Limousin animal and expect it to meet the quality specifications in certified Angus beef. But I do believe, and quite frankly know, that you would find cattle that have, from your background, dairy. I can take you to some dairies today that are using Limflex bulls on Holstein cows. And those resulting black calves obviously are being sold in high value branded beef programs. So yeah, as a breed association, we're very small compared to Simmental, or I'm sorry, compared to Angus and Hereford, and we will never reach their size. I think, quite honestly, if I'm being totally honest with you, Rena, we had a lot of popularity in the 1980s. And Limousin cattle have been known for their bad dispositions. And so there were a number of people that tried them in the 1980s. And there would be several continental breeds I would add to that, but I'll just pick on Limousin for a moment. They tried them. They're like, you know what? We had some of those once. They'd cleared every fence we had, and we ain't ever going to have them back on the ranch. And I will tell you from that standpoint, the Limousin breed was the first to have a docility EPD, where we actually score their attitude and temperament. And when you pay attention to those things, I promise you, just like people, temperament is genetic. It's partially environmental, but it's a lot genetic. And you have an animal that's bred to be kind of hyped up and amped up, and that's what they'll be, and their kids will be that way too.
Yep.
So if you focus on that, you'll make some improvement. But yeah, I'm not here to tell you that we're going to overtake the Angus breed. That's not the case. And I genuinely think that the British-based cow herd is the best cow herd to have. Again, they do a lot of things right in terms of fertility and in terms of mothering ability and milking ability and all those kinds of things. I just believe that much like the hog business, you have a maternal line, and then you have a line that you come in on as a terminal line that can create feeder calves that have the best of both worlds. And I tell people, I said, we've been fortunate so far that consumers continue to spend what we're asking them to spend on beef. But I don't think we should get fat and happy about that, because a little economic pressure, and I think we will see a consumer set that says, it's a little expensive for me. I don't think we can afford a steak today. And so I think we have to constantly keep our eye on delivering a quality product, but a product that is also efficient and cost effective to deliver. We'll never be as price competitive as pork and chicken, but we can be better than we are today in the beef industry, and that's what we're trying to do.
You also have a direct to consumer opportunity, right?
Yes.
Can you talk just a little bit about that and how you
Yeah.
and your wife and your kids have started that business, and just tell us a little bit about that.
It initially started as a 4-H project in the sense that we'd always have extra 4-H steers and we'd sell them halves, quarters, and wholes like a lot of other families. And so we still have a customer today, believe it or not, who bought some of my last 4-H steers when I was in high school, and they and their family and kids and now grandkids purchased from us. But my wife really took the bull by the horns when we moved back here to Colorado and started this business. I said, all right, we've got a home now for our high-end genetically elite cattle that can go up to wholesale and be sold as breeding animals. Now we've got to create a way to add value to those cattle that aren't going to make breeding animals. And so she had worked with Elanco Animal Health as a sales rep prior to us getting married, and had incredible and has incredible people skills and selling skills. And we wanted her to stay home for the kids, with the kids. And I said, so best thing I think you can do in your quote unquote spare time, right? Is to try to build a beef business and to use those skills to build a beef business. So we started that company, and we will sell between 60 and 80 head of cattle a year, halves, quarters, and wholes. We do not sell by the piece. I just have not wanted to get into a inventory management challenge. All right. And so Julie's done an extraordinary job building a client base that really ranges from Fort Collins to Colorado Springs, this Front Range area of Colorado. A lot of people here, a lot of people who obviously have some means to purchase product, and a lot of people who want to purchase a differentiated product. And so we feed out both steers and heifers. We don't implant into the cattle. There's no added hormones. We do not have any kind of antibiotic claim. We tell people we treat cattle just like we treat kids. If they get sick, we try to treat them with the right dose at the right time, but we're not going to be antibiotic free because we don't believe we can do that and take care of the animals the way we want to take care of animals. We hang the cattle 21 days. They're custom wrapped and frozen. We've got a USDA label, and then we sell them halves, quarters, and wholes to people, and have just been really, really blessed not only by that business, but by the friendships we've made with beef customers who've been buying beef from us for years, and will trust Julie enough that if they're wondering what to do with cube steak one night, they'll text her and she'll send them 3 different recipes of what to do that night. So she's
Nice.
been extraordinary at building that business.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. I think it's interesting that you've been able to stay in the whole halves quarter market and not
Yeah.
gone down to the cut, because I do think that that's where, you know, a lot of people find that they have to go in order to be
Yes.
able to move product. So I
Yeah.
think that's really interesting that you've done this for this many years and
Yeah.
have not had to resort to that and have been able to move your inventory.
Yeah, we've been fortunate, and it'll be interesting. I think one thing that's been helpful is that when you're of age of having a bunch of young kids and you're running around with people with families of 2 and 3 and 4 kids, that really is more of our target audience than the people who are now our age that their kids have left the home and they're like, yeah, I know we used to buy half, but my wife and I aren't going through it quite as fast anymore, right?
Right.
And would you sell us just some ribeyes and hamburgers? And I'm like, yeah, we'd love to do that, but then we end up with all the chuck roasts and the round
Roast.
roasts and and it's like, all right, now I've got 14 freezers out here with pieces and parts of meat that we can't get rid of. And so
Mhm.
we've always said that we were going to go down to that path and at least do some Christmas packages or something like that when the kids left home and we got more time. But I don't know what we filled our time with. We haven't done that yet.
Haven't quite found
Well,
all that time yet.
Yeah.
that is a challenge. Now, so when you look forward in agriculture, I have a friend in Texas that is a cattle producer,
Okay.
and he told me, he said, it doesn't work. He said, even at today's dollars,
Yeah.
I can't go buy a ranch,
Yeah.
buy grass, and make it cash flow.
Yeah.
And so we know that all of these markets are cyclical. Like we know that the consumer demand is up for beef.
Yeah.
We know that our numbers are at really historical lows.
They are.
Based on our population, but eventually this market is going to cycle.
Sure.
Because it seems like they all do. The crop markets do. All of our commodity markets do.
Without
So
question.
looking forward to the younger generation that
Yeah.
wants to get involved in agriculture, how do they? What kind of lens do they put on to be able to say, look, I want to get in the cattle business like Kevin Ochsner has done, and I want to do that over time, but with the expense of land and
Yeah.
all the other inputs that have come along the way. Is there a future for that generation? And if there is, how might they approach that?
So that's a fantastic question. And I think it's particularly good for the beef cattle space. I mean, because I tell people the one thing that we haven't done a very good job of in the beef cattle space, and particularly the cow-calf sector, is making it very scalable very easily. And the combination of assets required, dollars required, land mass required, labor required, to make it scalable is we've just not done nearly as good a job as the corn farmer in the middle of Nebraska. I've told people it'd be fun to take and do a little case study of two guys who in the early 1970s, say my dad's age, they grew up on a diversified farm, and it's 1972. One brother took 150 head of cows, and the other brother took 600 acres of corn and soybean ground. And one brother took and grew the crop business, and the other brother grew the cow business. And I would venture to suggest to you that the brother that had that corn and soybean business is now farming 6,000 or 8,000 acres of corn and soybeans in Nebraska. And the guy that took 150 cows may be up to 600 cows today. It's just a different scale ability in terms of the asset base, the land base, the labor base and stuff it takes to do that. And so I think that's been one of the challenges. To your question, Ron, I think it is sad but partially true that I don't know that there was a time, probably my grandpa's generation, that maybe you could get cows to pay for land. I don't think you can expect. I don't think you can expect cows to pay for real estate today. Maybe I'm missing something, but real estate has gotten so expensive, and particularly in lots of the places where we like to run cows, there is a lot of outside money, whether you're in Wyoming and Colorado or Montana or Texas, chasing that ground for, if nothing else, hunting ground, right? The amount of money people pay for hunting ground that I just can't, get a sharp enough pencil to figure out how to make it pencil for cows. So I think your question is a good one. In my experience, I will tell you that we wouldn't be doing what we're doing without a leased grass base. We've got, I focus my dollars on trying to build a cow herd and build a base station, so to speak, a headquarters with some raised feed that we can raise on this irrigated farm. But I've got to rely on leased grass. And I do think the good news is that we see an aging out of a lot of ranchers, and unfortunately, a lot of those kids are not coming back. I think there's going to be ranch land, grazing land to lease. It's not the easiest thing in the world, and you probably have to be pretty creative about where you're willing to go and where you're willing to live. But I think going forward in the next 20 years, there's opportunity. So I think people need to. I think one thing people need to do, and this is what I've told my son, is I said, you need to get really good at resource management. I mean, having a skill set that you can go into an absentee landowner as an example and help them understand how you can manage the land resources, the water resources, the wild resources. You might then have access to some ground that either they want to buy some cows or you manage it for them and run your own cows or do something like that. So I think start with the resource base, because there's precious few people that I think are really, really professionals at being good stewards of land and water resources. And I would say start there. And when you start there, opportunities will come to find you. I said, secondly, I think you're going to have to get creative about how you, if you don't come from a cattle family, how you through cow leasing arrangements or partnership arrangements claw your way back into the beef business. And then I also know some young people have done a nice job just in custom ranching. It's like, hey, Ron is older and he has a set of cows and he's tired of calving the cows, but he's going to pay me a custom fee for running his cows. And that's going to allow me to build an asset base that I can run some cows on my own. And ultimately, maybe I work out a deal with him to buy his cow herd. So I think it goes back to what Rena was saying in terms of some transition planning. If you're fortunate enough to find some ranchers that, have a cow herd, have a land base, but don't have kids coming back, is there creative opportunities for that? So yeah. I think it's going to take a lot of creativity, and I would summarize my comments by this. I've told my kids this many times too, many times in life. It's less about resources and more about resourcefulness. So I said, get creative, build relationships, build your skills, get creative, and then let God kind of open doors for you and walk through those doors as he opens them.
Yeah. I think that's really, really well said. And I think that also ties back into what we talked earlier about mentorship.
Yeah.
We have $1 trillion worth of production agriculture that's going to change hands in the next 10 years.
Exactly.
But 68% of those landowners don't have a transition plan. Right. And so we talk about this through the DIRT project. Rena obviously works with farms and ranches about trying to come up with an effective estate plan. But, certainly we need to make sure that we're engaged in our own industry. So I think number one, we need to make sure that that we understand that we're all on the same team. Yeah. In agriculture, no matter what we're bringing to the table, we're all on the same team. But what we can do to help perpetuate the success in our own industry is to make sure that we're encouraging others to get involved with the industry. And I think that we've been so private for so long. We don't want anyone to know our business. We don't want anyone from the outside telling us what to do. We don't trust people that walk onto our ranch. We got a kid that wants to be interested. Well, he'll be gone tomorrow. That type of mentality. I think we just have to change that. Yeah. And that we as producers who have been successful or producers who maybe have kids that aren't going to come back, to be mindful of the fact that there are a lot of the younger generation that want to be involved in agriculture, but we live in a different world than where our grandfathers and our great grandfathers lived. That like you said, you could buy an acre of ground and make it pay with 30 bushel wheat in Wyoming back in the day. And you can't afford to buy ground even here now and make it cash flow from crops. And the same goes for the cattle. And so I think we just have to take that lens and look at it, change it completely, really, and look through that different lens to say that, hey, we have a great opportunity to make our industry more successful in the future than it's been in the past.
Yeah.
But we have to be open-minded, and we have to engage, and we have to make sure that the hard conversations that we don't want to have, that we have those hard conversations, because it's the only way that I think American agriculture survives.
I think a person really does have to maybe get away from the total ownership mindset. I mean, again, I
Absolutely.
think that's one thing that I've seen change, is that in my dad's and grandpa's generation, it was about buying the farm and then managing the farm. And today, I could even take to some corn and soybean farmers that are like, you know what? Yeah, we got a base station and a machine shed and a bunch of equipment, and then we lease most of our ground because
Yeah.
I can't afford the land. I don't like the return the land gives me, and so I chosen to do this. It's a riskier way to live because a landlord can pull the lease next year. But I think people have to get in that mindset. The one thing that you said something in terms of relationships and engaging with one another, and let me give a shameless plug first to NCBA and then to other organizations, whether that be Farm Bureau or what have you. I think one thing that I challenge young people with is get involved in these organizations. I know
Yeah.
this phone allows us to network on the phone, but there's nothing like going to San Antonio, Texas, a couple of months ago, where 8 or 10,000 producers, cattle producers, gather together, and you're visiting with somebody, and you're not only you're learning things, but you're building relationships. And all of a sudden, you come to the State Cattlemen's Association of Wyoming Stock Growers 3 or 4 years in a row, and somebody sees you from across the room and say, that Ron, he's a sharp young man. And you get to talking, and guess what? Opportunities come to you instead of you going
Yep.
to the opportunities. But it's not going to
Absolutely.
happen if you just sit on your phone and
Yeah.
and have your nice little small friend group and never get out of your friend group. So I would put a shameless plug into whether it's the Commodities Classic, whether it's cattle conventions, you're right in the middle of pork country there, and National Pork Expo every year, Rena. But I would say get involved in those things, show up, and get engaged and build relationships, and you might be surprised at where the opportunities come.
Absolutely.
Great advice. Great advice. And that leads us, as we kind of start to wrap up here, that leads us to your involvement with Cattleman to Cattleman. And so you're a host on that show. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I call it Cowboy TV. It's not on the Cowboy Channel. It's on RFD TV. But it was interesting. They came to me and said, "Hey, we're thinking about starting a TV show, Cattleman, that would be kind of news and markets and happenings in the cattle industry. Would you like to try out for host?" And I'm like, I've never really done TV in my life. I was on the other side of that through FFA, did a lot of interviews and so forth. And I think it was somebody that had heard me speak enough and knew that I had some understanding of cattle business. So I went down there to this little studio to do a tryout, not knowing what I was going to get myself into. Walked in there, and of course I had to put an earpiece in and read a teleprompter and listen to the guys, and I'd never done that, and frankly I don't think I was very good that day. And I walked back out to sit down in the waiting room, and I met another lady who was there, and I introduced myself, and I said, "Are you here to try out for Cattleman?" "Yes." "She's here." And I asked the gentleman sitting next to her, I said, "Are you here to try out?" He says, "No, I'm her agent." And I'm like, "Oh, well, I guess I didn't bring an agent today. That was bad form. I should have brought Julie along, you know." And so anyway, I didn't get the job that day. They came back to me and said, "We've hired this lady, and we wondered if you'd do some voiceover work," which I think was a nice way of saying I had a face for radio, which I don't disagree with. And so I did voiceover work for a year or so, where they would send me a script. I'd do a little storyline, and now reporting Kevin Ochsner for Cattleman. And then I think it's about a year later that she was sick or absent or something, and they asked me to come in and moderate a panel show. And I did that, and actually that was easier for me because it was more conversation with other people about things that I knew and was passionate about. And I think I don't know this for a fact, but I think as it turns out, they decided that while she was very good in TV skills, this particular lady didn't have a lot of cattle background, and so they decided to take a chance on teaching me a cattleman TV as opposed to teaching a TV person cattle. And so I've been fortunate to do that since 2009, I want to say. It's a weekly show shown on RFD TV. We used to be an hour show. We rolled back to 30-minute show. It's I wouldn't say it's like late breaking news. We're not taping every day, and so for that you're going to have to tune into some of the other television opportunities, including what you all do at Farm Journal. But I think what it really does do is we have access to a lot of industry leaders. We bring really good content about new tools and technology, about political issues that are impacting a business. Some great economists that are on talking about longer term market trends, not where the market is today. And so it's been a ton of fun serving as host of that program and meeting so many of the movers and shakers in the beef industry. I've just thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah, that is an interesting position to be in when you have access to that many people
Yes.
consistently. The things that you pick up and the opportunities to talk about whatever is going on right there in the moment. That's a
It's
cool spot to
amazing.
be in.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we've had, I mean, as I think about walking into the Secretary Senator Perdue's office and visiting with him, we had a gentleman who is uh, Dr. Key Jim, who's just finishing up what will become the largest single feedlot in the country, 150,000 head of cattle in western Nebraska. We had him on the show during National Convention. All the NCBA presidents and officer team that I could just go on and on that are, have blazed huge trails in the beef cattle industry and are wonderful, wonderful thought leaders. I tell people I had Christy Nome on the show when she was a U.S. Congresswoman before she was even governor, and now Homeland Security in one of our DC shows. So that was fun to meet, political leaders back in DC as well. So it's been a real treat, and again, an example of something that it's not Kevin Ochsner's show, it's NCBA show, and I just happened to be able to host it for a time.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
Well, I think too that I'm going to encourage you to get our new Secretary of Agriculture on the show.
You know her, don't you?
Brooke Rollins, yes. So
We
she
do
is
have a picture.
FFA.
Oh,
do we have a picture?
Ron, back in the day,
they
were very young. And we have a photo from a few weeks ago where they got to see each other at Top Producer. So we have sort of the before and now pictures of that one.
That's impressive. And she probably has that same picture hanging up in her office in the presence of greatness. There's no doubt about it.
I'm gonna say probably not. But
well,
but
what
I can tell you is
interesting, real quickly, Ron. I just got word yesterday, and I had gotten wind of this some weeks ago, but it became official yesterday, so I can share it now. Jay Hamby, who was a National FFA officer a year after I was, has been appointed to the NIFA to head up NIFA, the National Institute for Food and Agriculture. And of course, he was telling me that in an interview with Brooke, she actually pulled up in the middle of an interview. It was a Zoom call. Pulled up a picture of him as a national officer and said, "Is this you as a national officer?" And so the FFA blue and gold jacket, I suspect, has some credibility in this administration, particularly in the Department of Agriculture.
Well, I think it just goes to show you, going clear back to the beginning of the program, that the amount of value that organization brings, that Brooke comes from a very humble background. And she and I were on National FFA Made for Excellence staff together in 1993 and 1994. And she's obviously done some tremendous things in the ag space, particularly in Texas, but also worked with, President Trump in his first administration, and then, of course, now serving as our Secretary of Agriculture in the second administration. And so that is, I think it just speaks volumes to what the program brings to the table, and the fact that if you put your best effort forward and you continue to live in a growth mindset, being uncomfortable, you never know where that is actually going to lead. And so what a great testament to the organization, and what a great testament to American agriculture.
Oh, without question. Yeah. And it's one of those things that those experiences and those relationships, right? At the end of the day, agriculture is not that large of an industry, really, when you get right down to it. And then you overlay that with some experiences in FFA and 4-H, and you just find yourself, those young people. In many cases, I tell people that those people who were your arch rivals and competitors. I was on a podcast not long ago. We were talking about livestock judging, and one of my arch rivals, Craig Huffines from Texas A&M University, we kind of just competed against each other and stared daggers across the room at each other when we were judging livestock. But now, 30 years later, he's been a client of mine, is a dear friend of mine. We've worked together on so many different projects over 35 years, because guess what? Those people who were on Made for Excellence staff together were the leaders in FFA then, and guess what? They're the leaders in agriculture today. And so those opportunities to engage and build relationships are just incredibly valuable to folks.
No question about it.
I think this is a really good segue into our wrap up of the show, because I knew FFA was like a really, really huge, important part of both of your lives.
Yes.
So we are going to focus our trivia on FFA today. Are you ready?
I
don't know if I'm ready or not. I'm going to have
I think I need to pull my son in right now, who's a state officer this year. He just poked his head in my office here, and I think I need to pull him in, Rena, to answer these questions.
Yeah, is it okay to phone a friend, or is that available on this show?
You probably are not going to need, but I almost changed this whole thing, and I almost did a revamp of the FFA pledge contest, and I was going to just put you guys on the spot and make you guys say the FFA pledge. That would I would be judging hard on that. But just our first question, I just thought it would be really fun to just talk about the size of this organization. So my first question is, how many FFA members are there in the United States?
I want to say it's over 1 million now.
It was 378,000 when I was on National FFA staff, and I think that it is over 1 million now.
It is. It's 1,027,273 is where we're at today. It is currently the largest student-led organization in the United States. So it has taken its place among the greats, certainly.
Yeah, and that's just as an aside. I remember one of the questions I got when I was elected national officer is, they said, "Future farmers of America, is there a future in farming?" And it was a time that it was tough getting folks, particularly young people, to even want to join FFA. It was like, why would we want to join that organization? And there were people who were wanting to write the obituary for the organization at that time, and that obviously was a mistake, showing its growth now.
Yeah. Now, part of their problem with growing back in the day was that women were not allowed to be members. So what was the year that women were allowed full membership?
1869.
I was going to say 69. Yeah.
It was 1969. Do you know what position women could hold in the chapters?
It was
it just
Sweetheart originally.
Sweetheart at that point?
Yeah, they had chapter FFA Sweethearts. And even when I was a national officer, there would be, I remember more states maybe in the South, but I remember white jackets. You'll remember those. The Sweetheart got a white corduroy jacket as opposed to the blue one. So
I just want you to know that I am a proud owner of a white corduroy FFA jacket.
Look at you.
Well, nice.
I should have known. You're such a sweetheart, right?
I'll have to find my white boots and I'll pass them down to you.
I think they'd be a little bit big for me, but we could probably stage a photo. Yes, when they in our chapter, the FFA Sweetheart competition was full farmer competition. You had to throw bales, move bales. You had to drive tractors. I mean, it was so I'm actually, I did not make our homecoming court, but I was the FFA Sweetheart. And so I'm actually really proud of that.
That's awesome.
For the audience you're with today, that goes further than homecoming queen. I promise you that.
That's no question. No question.
I tell you, it was quite a competition between me and my girls at the time. So.
Well, you could have, in my high school, you could have competed with both other girls in the high school.
Yep.
We actually had a bunch of girls that competed that year. And thank you to my dad for all the hay baling experience and other muscle building activities that allowed me to triumph. So
that is impressive, Rena.
Well,
So-
Kevin, thank you so much for taking your time today. We love the conversation, and what a lot of great information and tidbits and pieces of wisdom to go along the whole way, the last hour and a half or so. And we're just very grateful for your involvement in American agriculture, your inspiration that you've always provided to the youth and to industry leaders as a whole. And we look forward to staying in touch. And everyone, join us again next time here on Ag Inspo, and we'll see you again for another great episode.
Thanks, everybody.
You've been listening to the Ag Inspo Podcast with Ron Rabou and Rena Striegel. Find Ag Inspo on Transition Point Business Advisors or Farm Journal's YouTube channels, as well as anywhere you find your favorite podcasts. For more information about today's guest or the resources referenced today, please see the show notes listed below. Join us next time when we will meet another inspirational leader who has taken those small steps to bring about really big change.